It's on. It's good? Okay. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillah wa salatu wa salam ala Rasulillah wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa man wala. Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah wahdahu la sharika lahu wa ashhadu anna Muhammadan abduhu wa rasuluhu amma ba'd. O Allah, to you is all praise in all affairs. We ask you to guide us in our affairs, and we ask you to send peace and blessings upon your messenger and all of those righteous people that have followed after him. Ameen. I just want to share a few reflections on an issue that I think is of very, very primary importance in our lives, and how we can gain benefit on that particular issue in light of the science of hadith. So it's an issue that's important to us in our lives, and how we can benefit from the science of hadith and understanding this issue. So the issue is, as human beings, we're approached with a lot of information. Everyone has opinions on everything. All kinds of people have opinions on all kinds of things. So one of the most complicated yet important human endeavors that we deal with is how to process and think about information. You're living your life, you're presented with something. Maybe it's a piece of knowledge, maybe it's an opinion, maybe it's whatever it might be. It doesn't have to be only in deen. It could be in everything. Politics, society, which TV to buy, which car to buy, how much you should pay for it, how you should do this or that, whatever it might be. Our entire lives and existence is based around information. How do we understand this? In light of some of the conditions that the hadith scholars have laid for understanding narrations or information. Khabr, information comes to you, how do you analyze it? So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu in ja'akum fasiqun binaba'in fatabayyanu an tusibu qawman bijahalatin fatusbihu ala ma fa'altum nadimin. That, O you who believe, if someone who is untrustworthy comes to you with a piece of information, then clarify it, analyze it, look into it. If you do not do so, you will inadvertently affect another people as a result of your ignorance. This ignorance of yours is going to negatively affect someone else perhaps, or maybe it will negatively affect a situation, but it's going to have a consequence. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us here that it's very, very important actually to know what you're talking about. Of course, in deen, this takes a much, much higher level. And unfortunately, in our communities, a lot of people talk about issues of deen without knowing what they're talking about, and it has serious consequence on people's lives. And so the question then is very important. So what are the things that were laid down by the hadith scholars to analyze a piece of information, and how do they apply to our lives? So there's five conditions for an authentic hadith. Hadith in the end is a statement or an action or a piece of information about the Prophet ﷺ. So it's a piece of information, it's just particularly applied to the Prophet ﷺ. So what are those 5 conditions? Condition number 1, ittisal as-sanad. Ittisal as-sanad, meaning the chain of narration between this piece of information and the source of information, there's no gaps in it. There's no gaps in it. Okay? So whoever the source is and whoever you're receiving it from, there has to be a good chain between them. Otherwise, the reliability of it can become in question. The second issue is that every person that has shared that piece of information has to be tamam al-dabt. They have to be reliable in their transmission of information. Of course, there's impacts here on our personal behavior as well. Not only on how we perceive information, but on our personal behavior as well. So this is number 2. We're going to come back to them, don't worry. Number 3 is that every single person that's in that chain has to be adl. They have to be adl, which we'll get into what that exactly means, because it's different than dabt. It's different than reliability. accuracy. It's different than accuracy. It's an issue of moral character as well. The fourth condition is that it cannot contradict a piece of information that is more reliable. Shudud. No shudud in it. Which means that it doesn't yukhalif riwayat man huwa awthaqu min. That it can't be contradictory to a narration that's stronger than it. This is number 4. Number 5 is that there shouldn't be some sort of hidden defect, which is a lot more subtle. The true depth and rigor of hadith scholarship comes in the last 2. The first 3 are relatively easier. Not that they're super easy, but they're relatively easier. And this is where people sometimes make mistakes in hadith. They get a grasp of how to deal with the first 3 conditions, and they get excited. And they forget about the last 2. The last 2 is where the real depth of hadith scholarship comes in. Does it go against something that's stronger? Or is there some sort of hidden defect that maybe you just don't understand? And here on this last point, to give you an idea of what that means, there's a brother who, a Shaykh, who we had he was also studied in Azhar, he specialized in hadith, Shaykh Ali Godal. He's in Chicago now. And he wrote this article about hadith sciences and chess. So he said that when you have a chess master, the chess master is sitting there and they're playing the game. And in their mind, they've memorized all types of games that have gone before them. They've memorized different openings, different attacks, different defenses, all of this kind of stuff. And when the game is sitting in front of them, and it's their turn to move, they might make a move. You ask them, why did you make that move? They can't really answer. There's a reasoning behind it, but they can't put their finger on it right away. If they sat down and thought about it and looked at the game and all that kind of stuff, they could probably be able to tell you in the aftermath, well, this happened, and then that happened, and this is why in the end I chose this route. But at the moment, it's like, no, this is just the right thing to do. It's very similar with hadith sciences at the very highest levels. People like Bukhari, Muslim, not, us. Or people very, very high level. That they look at the hadith, they know there's something that's not right. And then with a little bit more digging, they find out what it is. So this is number 5. So 5 conditions. We're going to leave ittisal as-sanad to the end, that the chain is complete. So the first one we talk about is that the person is accurate in their transmission. Accurate in their transmission. Cannot tell you how important this is. Really. You cannot be accurate in your transmission if you don't listen well. So many times, people don't listen well. One of the great benefits of studying hadith, one of the great benefits of studying fiqh, is that you learn how to be accurate. Because you understand the weight of what you're dealing with, and you have to know what you're saying. You don't want to give the wrong impression. مَنْ كَذِبَ عَلَيَّ مُتَعَمِّدًا فَلْيَتَبَوَّعْ مَقْعَدُهُ مِنَ النَّارِ. The Prophet ﷺ said, whoever lies about me on purpose, then let them take their place in the hellfire. Now this is on purpose, but nonetheless, the weight of what you're saying is very heavy. Same thing in fiqh. Is it allowed? Is it not allowed? Is it disliked? Is it not disliked? All of this kind of stuff. Very, very heavy words. And so, is the person reliable in their transmission? How do you know that? How do you think hadith scholars would know this? You basically have to test them. Some people, and if you think about your life, you already know. If you just take a moment and think about your life right now, there are certain people, when they bring information to you, you take it with a grain of salt. In your mind, they're already ranked. Some people are 50%, some people are 70%, some people you take them right away, some people you have to get corroborating evidence, But in your mind, people are at different levels. So how accurate is the transmission from the outside? And then from the inside, for ourselves, how accurate are we when we transmit things? How accurate are we when we transmit things? It's a very serious issue. I can't tell you how many times people have come to me and they're like, in this time then you said this and this. I said, no, I didn't. I didn't say that. Well, no, I remember we were talking about it and you said this. That's not what I said. I said this. Well, it's the same. No, it's not the same. Let me tell you why it's not the same. Right? And it's different. There's consequences to it. And especially, again, in areas of deen, this is very serious. So number 1 is that accuracy of transmission. Number 2 is especially this is in the hadith, but I think it applies in general as well, although it might be a little bit less stringent in regular everyday life, is the person adl? When I tell you the definition of adl, you're probably going to get scared. This is the nature of the world that we live in. And you wonder, like, how many people are actually adl anymore? How many people are actually reliable, upright, trustworthy people in the definition of the Sharia? The definition is the person who's adl, they yajtanib al-kabair. Okay? They don't commit major sins. Number 2, وَلَا يُصِرُّ عَلَى الصَّغَائِرِ. And they're not consistent in minor sins. They can make minor sins, but they don't always make minor sins. It's something that happens here and there, and they won't kind of like be, it's not something that's part of their behavior, it's an anomaly to what they normally do. The third thing is, they're not known for anything that's from khawarim al-muru'ah, which is a little bit harder to understand. But basically it means that they're not known to do anything that's considered to be dishonorable in society. So some of the examples of this historically would be like in societies where everyone covers their head, males, I'm talking about females, although I've seen an academic one time argue that this was in relation to females. It's complete nonsense. But for males, you have societies where people always cover their head, always wear a topi, always wear a kufi, always wear something. If a male lives in a society like that and they don't cover their head, it's considered from khawarim al-muru'ah, that they're contradicting what's considered to, it's not, they're going against the generally accepted etiquette of how someone should be. And that's a sign that their reliability is lower. Maybe you should second guess the things that they tell you, because they don't have a concern for generally how they're perceived and a concern for more than themselves. Another example that's in classical kind of discourses is that it's from this category for someone to eat in public. To kind of like walk down the street and eat was considered something that was aib. Is something that's, you don't do that. Respectable people don't do that. And up to today, there's things that respectable people don't do. Although it's lessening more and more with every year. Like I remember when we were growing up, one of the things people would, like, it was considered very disrespectful to wear a hat inside. Not necessarily like a topi, but like a baseball cap. And every now and then you'll still see it. Someone's wearing a baseball cap. When they go into the bank, they take their baseball cap off. Or they're wearing a baseball cap and they go in to talk to someone and they take it off. It's considered from khawarim al-muru'ah in many ways to talk to somebody while you have sunglasses on. Because it's like they can't see you. They don't know what you're doing. They don't know what you're looking at. It's just not polite. It's not good etiquette. So all of these things fall into whether or not a person is reliable. Because you're trying to figure out something of the utmost importance. So you're trying to weigh, can I trust what this person is telling me? Can I trust what this person is telling me? So you have to know, are they intellectually reliable? And are they morally reliable? That's what these two questions basically are. Are they intellectually reliable? And are they morally reliable? So obviously the news can become very problematic. Very, very problematic when you take this into consideration. The third one, again, from this angle, is that it doesn't contradict something that's stronger than it. So maybe they pass that test. You think that they're intellectually and morally reliable. But they come to you with a piece of information and you happen to know that they're stronger. It's not exactly true. Like maybe I have a friend and that friend is a good person, very reliable person, doesn't generally talk about things that they don't know about and all this kind of stuff. But a medical issue comes up and they weigh in on the medical issue. And I had already spoken to Uncle so-and-so who's a doctor. Or maybe I spoke to 3 or 4 doctors. And you know what all 3 or 4 of those doctors told you. And even though this particular individual is reliable in general, what they're telling you right now goes against what those doctors told you. So do you accept it? Of course not. But there's always an understanding of how that works. It's interrelation of material. It's also something that's very important when we're coming to a conclusion on something. You don't come to a conclusion on something based on one evidence. It's not a good methodology. When you're trying to study something, you don't come to a conclusion based on one thing. One person told me so. Okay, one person told you so. you can keep it, if they're reliable, you might put it on a different level, but it's not something you're going to take like, I'm tooth and nail holding on to this thing. You don't have the full picture. One of the things that Shaykh Akram Nadawi, may Allah preserve him, was saying in one of his talks, he said, what made these early scholars so strong is that they engaged in a lot of shura. They're studying an issue, they come to a conclusion on the issue, they take their conclusion to all of the people who are specialized in this area. And through the conversation and the opinions and the debate and everything else, then you come to a stronger conclusion. See, because if you're going to know that this doesn't contradict something that's stronger than it, then that means that your area of analysis is wider than one. It has to be wider. So we know Abu Hanifa radiallahu anh was not just Abu Hanifa. He was the madrasa of Abu Hanifa. He had Abu Yusuf, and he had Muhammad ibn Hassan al-Shaybani, and he had Zufr, and he had Hassan ibn Ziyad, and he had all of these people who were sitting in his council. And when an issue comes up, they all talk about it. So it's not just one person. Same thing with Imam Malik radiallahu an. Imam Malik said, I didn't give fatwa until 60 or 70 of the people of Medina said that I can give fatwa. It's not his own conclusion. It's all of these people now have concurred that this is actually something that's strong. So this is an idea that we keep in mind. Same thing in Islamic studies. Generally in Islamic studies, usually you study, like say you're studying fiqh, you're going to study your madhab. Why do you study your madhab? So you know what you should do. And you know that what you're doing is right. Does that mean that you take that and you correct everyone else based off of it? No. Because you didn't do a wide survey yet. Even if you're not going to practice the wide survey, you're going to practice your school, you have to be aware of the wide survey if you're going to take it to other people. And so having a broader perspective is important on all kinds of issues. Number 4, does it have some sort of hidden defect? Again, it's just, is there something that's wrong with it that's not easily attainable? And this sometimes can happen with people too. You might know someone, for example, and you know that they're a good person, you know that they're reliable, and then in the conversation you're having with them on this particular issue, you kind of feel like they're different. Sometimes, when you know someone really well, you can tell how well they know something that they're talking about. Right? Sometimes you know someone really, you know them so well that when you're talking to them, this thing that he's saying right now, he's 90% sure of it. Then you have another conversation with them and you feel like this thing that he's saying right now, he's 60% sure. You could just tell. So there might be a hidden defect. There might be something that doesn't immediately pop out, but you have to be aware of it. Maybe they're saying something and in the statement itself, there's contradiction. No, maybe there's something that needs a little bit more depth. The last point that I think is also very, very important is ittisal al-sanad. Ittisal al-sanad, which was the first one in the 5. That the chain of narration has to be complete. In hadith, this is very simple. Like Bukhari has to have heard it from his teacher, who has to have heard it from his teacher, who must have heard it from his teacher, who must have heard it from his teacher, who must have heard it from the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Or if you're Malik, it's closer. So Malik has to have heard it from Nafi', for example, who heard it from Ibn Umar, for example, who heard it from the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. If you drop Ibn Umar, and Malik says, I heard it from Nafi', and Nafi' says, I heard it from the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, there's a gap, right? Now, this might not be as, clear cut for general information in life, but the same kind of principle applies in the sense that whatever piece of field that we're talking about, whoever is weighing in on that field, you have the question of who from the experts of that field have they attained this knowledge from that makes them someone that should be listened to. Do you see what I'm saying? So in the case of the Prophet, in the hadith that I just mentioned, the Prophet ﷺ has actions and statements and so on. Ibn Umar radiallahu anhuma has very intimate relationship with the Prophet ﷺ. There's a connection. That connection there makes it so that Ibn Umar radiallahu anh has a right to speak about what the Prophet ﷺ did or said. Nafi', who was the Mawla of Ibn Umar, he was the servant of Ibn Umar. He was obviously very close to Ibn Umar. So he understands when Ibn Umar says something that the Prophet ﷺ said or so on, he has the right to speak on this issue because there's a connection. Now that connection it goes back to the Prophet ﷺ, but it also goes back to the teachers that preceded that person. And this is a very, very important concept in Islamic studies and in anything. Someone doesn't just become a doctor because they read a bunch of books. You want to know, where did they study? Where did they study is important because it tells you who was it that was teaching them. And that means that those people who were teaching them were qualified. That's the only reason it matters. Where they studied is not as important as who they studied with. But where they studied becomes a placeholder that they studied with people that are reliable. So you have this thing. Nafi', by the way, was a very interesting personality. They say that his tongue wasn't like la yastaqim. His Arabic wasn't so. His tongue. It's not that his Arabic wasn't good. His tongue wasn't. Some people they just have heavy tongues, and they can be very, very strong in the language, but it doesn't come out the way that it doesn't come out super clean. Doesn't mean they don't know the language. It just doesn't come out the same. Some people, their tongue is very, they pick up languages easily and they sound very fluent. So Nafi' was known to be like that. He was also known to not really like younger people. He wasn't really, he's a very stern kind of personality. And Imam Malik knew that Nafi' had all of this knowledge from Ibn Umar. And they live in the same city. And Malik is a young student, he wants to learn and so on. So of course he's not going to let anything get in his way. It's determination, I'm going to learn. And this man has knowledge, even if he doesn't like young people and I can't sit with him, I'm going to get knowledge from him. I'm going to do what I need to do. So Malik used to do something really funny. He would go and he would wait outside of Nafi''s home because he knows eventually he has to come out for prayer, right? When the salat time comes, Nafi' is going to have to come out for salat. So he would go and he would wait outside of his house at salat times, every now and then, not every salat. When he comes out of his house, he would say to him, Assalamu alaikum. So now what has to happen? It's wajib. He has to say salam, right? Wa alaikum salam. Then Imam Malik would go one way. Nafi' would go the other way. But he knows he's going to the masjid, right? So he kind of like shadows him. Both going to the masjid. When they get to the door of the masjid, Malik will pop up again. And he'll say, by the way, what did Ibn Umar say about so-and-so? Or did you hear the hadith from Ibn Umar that the Prophet ﷺ, he'd ask him one thing. Like he has things that are in his mind that he needs to get. So he'd pop up, he'd ask him a question. He'd get the answer, he's like, okay, this is it. Wait a couple of days, do it again. Over time, he gets the knowledge. It's the best he can do. But he's not going to leave Nafi' because Nafi' is reliable. They say that Imam Malik, this chain of narration that I said, this is one of the strongest chains of narration that there is. Malik on Nafi' on Ibn Umar on the Prophet ﷺ. Interestingly enough, one of the modern hadith scholars, relatively modern hadith scholars in Morocco, he said about a chain of narration that passes through the subcontinent, Indian subcontinent, that whenever he uses this chain, he feels like he's narrating Malik on Nafi' on Ibn Umar. Anyone know who it is? Shaykh Imran might know who it is. He would say this about if he narrated from, let's see if I can remember. I think it was Abdul Ghani al-Dahlawi to Muhammad Ishaq al-Dahlawi to Abdul Aziz al-Dahlawi to Shah Waliullah al-Dahlawi. So he passed through the whole. So because this family, all of them are huge scholars. So when I go through one, when I use this chain that goes through this one to this one to this one to this one, I feel like I'm narrating Malik on Nafi' on Ibn Umar. SubhanAllah, it's a beautiful statement. So to go back, Nafi' then has he has a right to say from Ibn Umar, I heard such and such. There's a connection. Then Malik has this relationship with Nafi' that makes him realize there's a connection. So what is the connection of that person who has an opinion on something to the material that they're presenting? It's very important. Have they studied it? Have they not studied it? Is it their opinion? Is their opinion based on anything? Do they have some sort of connection to experts in the field? What is their qualification? And if there's not a connection, then you wonder about what is the reliability. Again, it affects it. So the 5 from the beginning to consider whenever we're dealing with any piece of information. Number 1 is the connection of the chain. What is their connection to that material? Number 2 is the accuracy of the narrator. The accuracy of the narrator. Number 3, the intellectual reliability of that person. Number 3 is the ethical and moral reliability of that person. Are they someone that can be trusted? And that could range from issue to issue. Maybe they're trusted in one thing, but they're not in something else. Could be. The 4th is that it doesn't contradict something that's stronger than it. Right? And the 5th, that doesn't have a hidden defect. So remember these 5 things, it has double benefit. First of all, these are the 5 conditions of sahih, according to especially the later hadith scholars. These are the 5 conditions. If a hadith is sahih, it has to fit. These 5 conditions have to be met. And then also it helps us to analyze information that comes to us from others. And the 3rd thing is that it helps us to impact how we live our own lives, how we deal with information and relaying it to others as well. Sometimes it's better to be quiet when you can't remember something. Sometimes it's better to be quiet, but that's not always easy. And sometimes being quiet is more powerful than saying something. The Arabs say, رُبَّ سُكُوتٍ أَبْلَغُ مِنْ كَلَامٍ. It's possible that being quiet is more eloquent than speaking. Someone, maybe they don't say something, it means more than when they say something. So I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to guide us and to bless us and to help us to be good and righteous people in this life so that He may be pleased with us in the next. We ask Him to give us knowledge that benefits us and to benefit us with that which He has taught us. And we ask Him to increase us in our love for the righteous people and the people of knowledge. Ameen. Any questions? Yes.
Is there any in the Quran anywhere, as far as my knowledge goes, not that I want to make true, that the ayah says that eating beef is not prohibited in India or in the hadith, because there is a lot of controversy going on in India right now. I want to know that. Because they have put a billboard, they are putting big billboards stating that eating beef is not permissible according to Islam.
I don't know. There's probably, Shaykh Imran, do you want to weigh in on this? No? Yeah. Well, outside of the social political situation in India right now, as a general concept, I'm not aware of anything that would prohibit eating beef as long as it's slaughtered properly. Now, that's the general rule. It's possible that in specific situations, the rule could shift for temporary reasons. That could be minor or major, they could be micro or macro. Like for example, the general rule for eating pork is that it's not allowed, right? But if someone is dying in the desert and the only thing they can eat is pork, then it becomes wajib for them to eat the pork. Not even okay, it becomes required for them to eat the pork in order to survive. So the general rule is that you don't eat it, although in a particular circumstance it may be required for you to eat it. So when it comes to beef, the general rule is that if it's slaughtered correctly and it's not leading to harm towards the individual and their health and so on, then it's permissible. For example, if there's like mad cow disease and you know that the cow is sick and you slaughtered it and ate it, then that would be haram because you're causing harm to yourself. But the general rule is that it's okay. I don't know why again, there may be particular social political situation that's making someone take that stance, but that wouldn't change the general rule. So I don't know if I can comment on the particular circumstantial opinion or fatwa, or even who is saying that or why that's there, but the general rule is that it's okay.
And the other thing is what I'm watching this very closely. There is some alims, they give one opinion, and there are some alims they give another contradiction. It is so burning issue right now. Is life and death for 17 billion Muslims.
Mm.
17 to 20 billion Muslims are in a big jeopardy.
Yeah.
Is there any Zaif hadith also?
On the beef thing, I don't know. Like I said, I can't comment on the particular issue in that context, and I'm not aware of the hadith and the issue, so I can't say. Yeah.
So you're talking about how one defines an individual as an adam, right? And we talked about following some of what I would consider cultural influences, right? You mentioned, for
Yeah.
example, the cap. I'm not sure I'm quite getting how it defines you as an adam. As I guess following the cultural norm defines you, or because I don't see anything moral or ethical in there.
Yeah. It can. And I think it depends on societies. Like for us in America, it's sometimes I think hard to understand this because people just